April 7, 1943, Henderson Field, Guadalcanal. A hiss of pressure escaped the fuel line as it disconnected from the Grumman F4F Wildcat. Second Lieutenant James Sweat tightened his gloves and slid into the cramped cockpit. The air was hot, thick and heavy with the smell of gasoline. In less than 20 minutes, his name would be known across the Pacific. He was 22, an engineer's son from the California coast, who had never fired his guns in battle, never seen an enemy aircraft except on film reels, and had no idea the next quarter hour would carve his place in Marine Corps history. The radio snapped alive. A clipped voice, urgent and metallic. Condition red. Condition very red. 150 enemy aircraft inbound from the north. Every pilot on Guadalcanal understood that call. It meant an assault unlike anything since Pearl Harbor. The island's airfield, a rough strip of steel matting and mud, was the last defense between the Japanese strike force and the Allied fleet below. 76 Allied fighters began to scramble. Engines roared across the narrow field. Sweat poured from men who knew the odds. Among them, one young pilot, quiet, methodical, raised on machines, tightened his harness and waited for takeoff clearance that might be his last. James Sweat was born June 15, 1920, in Seattle, Washington, first child of George and Nellie Sweat. His father, an electrical engineer and part-time Marine reservist, owned a small company that built marine pumps and turbines. The business wasn't glamorous, but it kept ships running and harbors alive. The family moved to San Mateo, California, when James was still a boy. He grew up among the smell of oil, metal filings, and seawater. His world was precision tools, pressure gauges, horsepower charts, the language of machinery. He learned how things worked long before he ever touched an aircraft. In high school, nothing marked him as remarkable. He played no sports, joined no clubs. He was quiet, reliable, and fascinated by how engines breathed. After graduating in 1939, he attended College of San Mateo, a local junior college that most working families could afford. That decision, ordinary at the time, changed everything. Before war came, the U.S. government launched the civilian pilot training program, hoping to build a reserve of aviators. College students could learn to fly for free. Sweat enrolled immediately. Flying suited him the way metal fits its mold. The same intuition that helped him tune pumps and turbines translated perfectly into understanding airspeed and lift. He soloed early, logged hours faster than anyone expected, and by the end of the program had accumulated over 450 flight hours, an enormous advantage. When global war ignited, that number mattered. Naval aviation trainees rarely saw even half that much flight time before combat school. Sweat entered military flight training already more seasoned than many instructors. By late 1940, the world was burning. Europe lay under Nazi control. Japan was advancing across Asia and the Pacific. The United States braced for the inevitable. On August 26, 1941, Sweat enlisted in the U.S. Naval Reserve, beginning official flight training a month later at Corpus Christi, Texas. He was 21, leaving behind steady work at his father's shop for the uncertain life of a combat pilot. Flight school revealed what civilian training had hinted at: discipline, calm nerves, and a natural feel for machines. He mastered formation flying, emergency procedures, and gunnery drills faster than most cadets. In early 1942, he graduated top 10% of his class, earning his gold wings and a rare choice: serve with the Navy or join the Marine Corps. He chose the Marines. On April 1, 1942, Second Lieutenant James Sweat received his commission. He stood 5'11", 154 pounds, brown hair, blue eyes, ordinary features masking a quiet intensity. Advanced courses followed: tactical training at Quantico, carrier qualification aboard the USS Wolverine on Lake Michigan, and combat readiness exercises in San Diego. Instructors who had survived Pearl Harbor and Wake Island taught survival first, victory second. Their rules were simple: stay fast, dive, never turn with a zero, protect your wingman, fire short bursts, live to fight again. By March 1943, Sweat shipped out aboard the escort carrier USS Nassau. The journey took him through Hawaii for advanced drills, then onto the combat zone. Veterans on board told stories of relentless Japanese raids, 4 sortie days, and casualty lists so long that entire squadrons vanished within weeks. When he arrived at Espiritu Santo in late March, he was assigned to Marine Fighting Squadron 221, VMF 221, part of the 1st Marine Aircraft Wing. The unit's name carried weight, the same squadron that had fought to the last man at Wake Island in 1941. Now rebuilt with new aircraft and fresh faces, they were headed to one of the most contested airfields in the world. Guadalcanal's Henderson Field was nothing but a scar of steel and mud carved out of jungle. Originally a Japanese project, it was seized by U.S. Marines in August 1942 and defended for 8 brutal months. The runway was made of pierced steel planking. The hangars were sandbag tents and everything smelled of damp earth and exhaust. Rain turned the strip into sludge. Mosquitoes brought malaria. Heat melted men inside their cockpits. But that crude airstrip controlled the Solomon Islands, and the Solomons controlled the sea route to Australia. Whoever held Henderson Field held the South Pacific. Sweat's squadron spent its first weeks flying patrols that never met the enemy. He learned radio discipline, practiced formation attacks, memorized coastline landmarks, and waited. Waiting, in that climate, under constant alert, became its own kind of battle. By early April, reconnaissance photos and intercepted radio signals revealed massing Japanese aircraft at Rabaul, Bougainville, and Kahili. Commanders recognized the signs. An operation was coming. It was Operation Waigo, planned by Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto himself, a massive counteroffensive to blunt Allied momentum. Nearly 350 Japanese aircraft gathered for the strike. Dive bombers, torpedo planes, and Zero fighters stripped from carriers and air bases alike. The first assault, scheduled for April 7, 1943, targeted Guadalcanal. Yamamoto dispatched 67 Aichi D-3A Val dive bombers, escorted by 110 Mitsubishi A6M-0s, 177 aircraft total. Their objective, destroy Henderson Field and the U.S. ships anchored nearby. At 12:26 p.m., Australian coast watchers spotted the formations inbound. By 2:00 p.m., the call reached Guadalcanal. Condition red. The largest air raid since Pearl Harbor was minutes away. At noon, 4 Wildcats from VMF 221 patrolled the skies above the Russell Islands, 30 miles northwest of Guadalcanal. Second Lieutenant James Sweat led the section. The patrol was quiet, the ocean below still, sunlight flashing across the wings. After 2 uneventful hours, low fuel forced to return to base. They landed at Henderson Field just after 2 p.m. Ground crews began refueling by hand, 117 gallons per plane pumped through steel hoses. The process was slow, half an hour at least. Sweat climbed down, stretched, and reached for his canteen. Then came the shout from the operations shack. Condition red! Launch everything! Engines coughed to life. Fuel lines were ripped free. Gasoline spilled across the steel planking. Every fighter on the island, 76 in total, was thrown into the air. Sweat ran for his aircraft, climbed the ladder, and sealed the canopy. He was still strapping in as the ground chief waved him forward. The Wildcat's radial engine bellowed. Propeller wash scattered dust and fuel vapor. Throttle forward. Flaps down.
Speed 70 miles per hour.
The fighter clawed off the runway, barely clearing the palm trees at the strip's edge. He reached for the crank handle. 30 turns by hand to retract the landing gear. Right hand off the throttle, left on the stick, every muscle braced. The Wildcat climbed slowly, heavy with ammunition and half fuel. Below him, the entire horizon shimmered with exhaust trails. Corsairs, P-38 Lightnings, P-39 Airacobras, P-40 Warhawks, a patchwork force climbing toward one incoming storm. They knew the odds. 76 Americans versus 177 Japanese. At 14,000 feet northwest of the Russells, black dots appeared against the sun. They multiplied, spreading across miles of sky. Sweat's breath slowed. He had never seen so many aircraft at once. He pressed the radio key. Tally-ho. Bandits 12 o'clock high. Multiple groups, static. Then commands reply. All fighters engage. Good hunting, that was all. No formation brief, no tactics. Just engage. Sweat rolled his Wildcat into a dive. 3 wingmen followed. Below, Japanese Aichi D-3A dive bombers, the Val, advanced in tight formation. 2-man crews guiding their payloads toward American ships. Each carried a 1,000-pound bomb. He chose a group trailing slightly behind the main formation, 3 valves straggling. He dropped from the sun at over 350 miles per hour. The first valve filled his gun sight. Range closing, 200 yards. 150? 100. Sweat pressed the trigger. 650 caliber Browning machine guns thundered. The Wildcat shuddered from recoil. Tracers ripped through the bomber's fuselage and left wing. The rear gunner fell silent. The plane flared, smoked, then burst apart mid-air. 1 down. He rolled right, sighted the second valve diving toward the sea. Short, controlled bursts. The bomber ignited, spiraling into the water. 2 kills in 30 seconds. Sweat climbed, saw the third valve trying to escape. The Wildcat's engine strained. He closed from above, fired again. The valve exploded. Debris scattered across the ocean. 3 kills. 90 seconds of combat. The sky was chaos and contrails, fire and smoke. Sweat's wingmen were gone, chasing their own targets. He was alone. Then white flashes tore across his left wing. Friendly anti-aircraft shells burst nearby. Shrapnel slashed through the aileron. The Wildcat jerked sideways, half crippled. He steadied the controls. Oil pressure steady. Temperature normal. The fighter could still fly. He stayed in the fight. Below, another formation of 6 valves began descending toward Tulagi Harbor, preparing to attack ships anchored below. They were unescorted, their zero cover scattered by the first intercept. Sweat dropped behind them from altitude using the sun as cover. Range, 200 yards. He fired. The rear bomber erupted instantly. Bomb detonated, fragments scattering in all directions. He flew through the smoke cloud. Windscreen smeared with oil and debris. He pulled up slightly, sighted the next. Another burst. Flames trailed from its fuselage. The second fell burning into the sea. He methodically advanced down the line. Each pass, brief, precise. Short bursts. Controlled fire. Every bomb destroyed in the air meant 1 less on the fleet. 4 valves disintegrated under his guns. Sweat's ammunition counters showed nearly empty, each Browning down to a few seconds of fire. The 5th valve refused to die easily. He closed to within 50 yards, close enough to see the rear gunner's face. He squeezed the trigger until tracers stopped. The valve burst apart. 7 confirmed kills, 15 minutes since takeoff. A single pilot had destroyed nearly half a squadron. Ahead, 1 last valve fled low over the waves. Sweat lined up his shot and pressed the trigger. Nothing. The guns were empty. 1,440 rounds spent. He should have broken off. Instead, he dove anyway, closing on the bomber with the illusion of threat. The Japanese rear gunner opened fire. Bullets shattered the Wildcat's canopy. Glass cut across Sweat's face. Blood filled his eyes. Oil splattered the cockpit as rounds pierced the engine cowling. The engine coughed. Oil pressure fell. Temperature spiked. The Pratt & Whitney R-1830 was dying. He turned toward Henderson Field, coaxing what little power remained. Black smoke trailed behind. 15 miles to base, then metal screamed. The engine seized. Propeller froze. The Wildcat became a glider, altitude dropping fast. He scanned below. The waters off Florida Island looked calm. He trimmed for glide speed, 110 miles per hour. Every second counted. At 200 feet, he lowered the landing gear to act as a brake. Unlatched the canopy, tightened harness straps 50 feet, 40, 30, 20, 10. The tail struck first. The Wildcat slammed into the sea, slowed violently. Sweat's face smashed against the panel. His nose broke. Pain blurred his vision. The fighter began sinking nose first. Cold seawater flooded the cockpit. He unbuckled, tried to rise, when his parachute harness caught. He pulled, twisted, yanked again. The cockpit filled to his chin. His lungs burned. One last pull, the strap tore free. He pushed upward. Light disappeared. Then a sudden buoyancy. His life vest inflated at the last possible moment. He shot to the surface, gasping blood and seawater. Overhead, the sky still burned. Explosions echoed across the harbor. Within 15 minutes, a Coast Guard rescue boat spotted him. They dragged him aboard, bleeding and half-blind. Someone handed him morphine. Another offered a bottle of scotch. He drank. He had survived. The Coast Guard boat cut its engines beside the hospital pier at Tulagi Harbor. 2 sailors lifted Sweat from the deck. His face bloodied, his uniform soaked in oil and salt water. The medical team rushed him inside the small field hospital near the beach. A Navy doctor cleaned his wounds, stitched his cheek, and straightened his broken nose. Glass had sliced above his right eye, but vision remained intact. Despite the damage, the broken nose, the cuts, the exhaustion, there were no internal injuries. 15 minutes of combat had left him battered but alive. By nightfall, the staff confirmed what the pilots had already begun to whisper across the island. The young Marine from California had destroyed 7 enemy aircraft, all in his first mission. During the following days, intelligence officers and squadron pilots arrived to document the event. Multiple airmen confirmed seeing a lone Wildcat dive repeatedly on enemy bombers over Tulagi. Shipboard anti-aircraft gunners reported the same. One American fighter attacking without pause, destroying one VAL after another. Each witness's account matched the same pattern. A single F-4F breaking through formation after formation, firing until its guns fell silent. Those testimonies became the official record of the mission. Sweat himself remembered little beyond fragments. The smell of burning oil, the hammering recoil, the static of the radio. When questioned, he spoke sparingly. "Just doing my job," he said. No dramatics, no boasting. The final tally stood firm. 7 confirmed destroyed, 1 probable, all within 15 minutes of combat. It was one of the most effective single-mission performances in Marine aviation history. He spent several weeks at Guadalcanal Naval Hospital. Bandages covered his face. The smell of antiseptic replaced the scent of aviation fuel. Outside, the war continued. The sounds of engines and gunfire echoed daily from the airstrip a few miles away. By the second week, doctors cleared him for light duty. His fellow pilots visited often, some bringing cigarettes, others stories from new engagements. Many of them would not survive the coming months. The Solomons campaign remained one of the bloodiest aerial battles in the Pacific. Sweat's wounds healed slowly, but his calm remained unchanged. He rarely spoke of the mission. To him, it had been reaction, not heroism. News of the event reached the United States within weeks. The Marine Corps issued a formal statement citing his extraordinary courage and skill under fire. He received the Navy Cross, the second highest decoration for valor. The citation described his lone attack against numerically superior forces and the destruction of 7 enemy aircraft in a single engagement. It noted that he continued the fight even after sustaining injuries and losing engine power. Newspapers back home printed headlines calling him the mechanic who beat the empire. Reporters visited his family's shop in San Mateo, photographing the pumps and turbines that had once filled his days before the war. His parents answered most questions. James avoided interviews altogether. He returned to flying as soon as doctors cleared him. By late summer 1943, he was back with VMF 221, this time stationed in the Central Pacific. Combat was constant, smaller raids, reconnaissance missions, escort flights. He continued flying until the war's end, logging hundreds of hours across multiple campaigns. His colleagues described him as quiet, analytical, and disciplined. He spoke rarely about April 7th, referring to it only as the day everything worked. The post-war years saw him return home to California, where he resumed work in his father's marine engineering business. The war faded into photographs, citations, and a single gold medal locked in a desk drawer. Historians later analyzed the mission as a textbook case of mechanical mastery meeting instinctive decision-making. Sweat's technical background had given him an intuitive understanding of his aircraft, knowing how far the engine could be pushed, how to ration bursts, and when to trust momentum. It was not luck but mechanical discipline that had saved him. His performance entered marine aviation history as one of the most precise and efficient air combats ever recorded. 7 enemy aircraft destroyed in one sortie, all confirmed by multiple observers using only 1,140 rounds of ammunition. No cinematic celebration followed, no speeches, just a line in the Marine Corps archives and a quiet man who preferred engines to applause. The April 7th engagement marked the collapse of Japan's last major coordinated air offensive over the Solomon Islands. Admiral Yamamoto's Operation I-Go had aimed to cripple Allied air and naval power at Guadalcanal. Instead, it achieved the opposite. The Japanese lost 39 aircraft that day, far more than they could replace, while Allied losses remained minimal. The destruction of those bombers and escorts weakened Japan's ability to challenge American supply routes to Australia. From that point forward, Japanese air presence in the southern Solomons never fully recovered. The sky belonged to the Allies. One of the men responsible for that shift had been a 22-year-old Marine on his first mission. His precision, restraint, and refusal to break discipline turned a desperate defense into a decisive victory. Post-war analysts examined Sweat's combat report during training evaluations for future naval aviators. His methods were dissected for lessons in energy management, gunnery discipline, and tactical judgment under pressure. He had demonstrated the Wildcat's core strength: durability, diving attack advantage, and stability under fire in a single engagement. His control inputs and ammunition economy became examples in classroom lectures at Pensacola and Quantico. Historians described his approach as calculated aggression, not reckless, not hesitant, but methodically lethal. The record confirmed his gunnery efficiency. Every target struck within close range, every burst short and decisive. It was the mechanical logic of an engineer applied to aerial warfare. When the war ended, Sweat declined continued service. He returned to civilian life, married, and worked again in the marine pump industry. Those who met him afterward described him as precise, quiet, and uncomfortable discussing combat. He preferred to talk about machinery, not metals. The Wildcat he flew, Bureau number 2084, never left the seafloor near Florida Island. No recovery operation was ever attempted. Its remains became part of the Pacific seabed, the resting place of the machine that had carried him through 15 minutes of concentrated war. In retrospect, his first mission stood as a symbol of the Pacific Air War's transformation. By 1943, victory no longer depended on aircraft superiority but on discipline, training, and mechanical understanding. Sweat represented that new generation. Pilots who fought not through instinct alone but through systems knowledge and precision. His achievement remains documented in Marine Corps archives. 7 enemy aircraft destroyed, 1 probable 15 minutes of engagement. 1 wounded pilot returned alive. No legend embellishes the event. The facts themselves suffice. He was not a celebrity, not a public figure, but a craftsman who happened to fight in the air. April 7, 1943, 15 minutes above Guadalcanal, turned a machine worker's son into a symbol of mechanical mastery under fire. History remembers him not for words spoken or honors worn, but for a single truth. When precision met courage, one man altered the sky.